Good morning and many blessings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reiko Sunday Detox. Again, that is Reiko Sunday Detox. And if you guys have been keeping up, we are now on episode 21. I hope you guys are doing well with everything going on with this quarantine. And let's kind of distract ourselves a little bit, because I know some of you guys are probably at home with your parents and there's having some generational constraints going on here. Because I know right now I could be down in Tampa with my dad, who's a whole different generation, and dealing with the craziness there. Or even with my younger siblings, and that's another generation. So what we're going to talk about is generational stigmas and differences. Especially a lot of the slack that we get, and the problem going to be with our generation is that we're going to look down at the younger generation and do the same. So let's kind of stop some stigmas and kind of look at what we could do to stop it. First things first, I know growing up, you guys probably heard back in my day, we were more grateful to even have $100 every paycheck. Or, back in my day, we would just go to the doctors, or we would just, go to the medicine cabinet and get, some Robitussin or some stuff like that. Oh, you broke an arm, you just drink some Robitussin, you'll be great. I used to joke with people all the time, but I was super serious when I said that my family refused to go to the doctor. And then I realized that it's not just my family that did it. It was a lot of African American families or ethnic families that did the same thing, where they refused to go to doctors. A lot of the times we do hear the stereotype of, my parents just basically leave it to God and let God handle it and this, that, and the other. But in all actuality, when you look down at it and you look at it and analyze it, that's one thing our generation's changing. So a lot of the older generation don't understand. They are looking at it with, their brows kindly, slightly slanted, and their nose kind of turned up at us like, well, you guys are weak. You guys are super emotional and super sensitive. Yes, we are sensitive because the fact of being we're not allowing ourselves to go through the same generational issues as them. We have a lot more resources. We have a lot more freedom. And we don't have a reason to actually be be very happy about the things that we have, because almost everything that we have is not limited. Unlike in their generation where things were limited, happiness was limited, money was limited, job was limited. And nowadays there's so endless possibilities in our generations where we are so quick to leave a job. So a lot of our older generations look at us like, oh, so you just bouncing from job to job, huh? Back in my day, there was only one job and you kind of had to stick it there if you liked it or didn't like it. And that's just one thing that I know for a fact. When I have children, I don't want to pass that generational stigma on and look down at them and realize that, with every generation, there's going to be new developments and evolving. So when I have kids or whenever I adopt kids, I got to look at their generation and what's going on in that time compared to what's going on in our time, and just appreciate that, they're constantly evolving. I may not agree with it. Just like for the longest, I could say I honestly didn't care for certain music artists, but I realized a lot of music artists are catered for that generation, and a lot of the younger generation likes that stuff. And now I'm starting to, when I started listening to myself and how I bash some of them, I'm like, dang, I'm really starting to sound like my parents, and I didn't want to sound like them. I honestly didn't. I'm already breaking a lot of those stigmas. I'm already breaking a lot of those habits that was passed down from generation to generation. A lot of the Black community was all about, pray to God and just let God take over and handle that, and you'll be fine, just let God. But they be so quick to bash, the older generation is so quick to bash gay people, but will definitely hide the family pedophile like it's okay and just ignore it, because they rather you be known for touching little girls than messing around with somebody of the same size. So honestly, at the end of the day, one thing that we can possibly do is look at the stigmas from different generations and see how we can go ahead and process and make it better. Because honestly, the only way to end generational stigmas is by you. Because unfortunately, a lot of the older generations are kind of set in their ways. Not too many of them are more open-minded. Not a lot of them are going to look at, oh, your generation's a different time. Oh, the generation below you is a different time, and things of that nature. Like, for instance, my dad to this day thinks that I will not grow up until I have kids. I've had 2 miscarriages, and honestly, the things that he see me go through is different than what I do in real life. Like, in his eyes, I'm still immature, can't really handle things, but I'm a child that basically I panic when I don't pay a bill. I make sure all my bills are paid on time, in full. I don't like making partial payments. I'm actually very responsible. If my siblings need anything, I try everything within my power to try to help them. And same with my sister, she's the same way. And that's just it. Like, in his mind, and a lot of his generation believes that we don't grow up until we have kids. And a lot of people don't realize that that doesn't necessarily make you a grown-up. Paying bills, handling responsibility, knowing the difference between what needs to be handled and versus what doesn't need to be handled, what is a need versus a want. What dictates you being an adult is you. That doesn't matter what anybody else's opinions. And one thing I realize about a lot of the difference between the older generation and the younger generation, the more and more generations come out, the less and less they care about other people's opinions. Right now we care more about strangers' opinions about us, while our parents cared more about what their parents thought of them. And a lot of millennials, in a way, we still care about what our parents think, but we also care about strangers, like what people on social media care. While a lot of the younger generations, they start caring more about themselves, because a lot of us in our generation are starting to see the flaws, and we're trying to pass them down to our children. In some cases, there is some people who are still passing down bad stigmas, but they don't know right from wrong. Like, in their eyes, they don't do no wrong. They can't do no wrong. And honestly, in order to make a better world, we have to start with ourselves and make our way to the future. We can't waste our breath trying to change the viewpoints of the older generations, because unfortunately they're set in their ways. I've always been a firm believer of a man is going to be set in his ways until he hits midlife crisis. Like, that's not going to change, or unless something happens. And it has to be something detrimental. It has to be something like health. It has to be a very bad traumatic relationship breakup. Something traumatic has to happen to a guy to make him want to change. And even then, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to change for the better. He can change just a little bit. Now, with me, a lot of my change came from I saw the outcome of the things going on in my life. And I saw the possibilities. The way my mind thinks, and the reason why I have bad anxiety, is I think on a multiple outcome level. I think of every choice. I know the best analogy I tell people how my brain works is, back in the day on the standardized test, there used to always be a question talking about Susan or Adam has 5 shirts and 6 pairs of jeans and 3 pairs of socks and 2 shoes. How many different possible outcomes are there? And the way I think, that's how my mind goes. I literally think on all the possible outcomes. And it's so many thoughts that swarm through my head at once that if I, for any reason, see any thought that would just be a negative, or I think of all the negative outcomes, and if more negative outcomes outweigh the good ones, then I'm like, okay, no, you know what? We need to change something. I think I like this path way better. This is why I'm going to need to make this decision. And that's how I think. So typically, I think long and hard about the choices that I make in life. That's the reason why, like, I'm the way that I am. A lot of people like, oh, why did it take you so long to do this type of modeling? Because I thought of all the different outcomes, and at that time I really cared about like my family's opinion. And then I was just like, at the end of the day, my family's opinion really doesn't matter, because after 18 I really don't live with them and I could take care of myself, because I always thought that maybe one day I may have to fall back on them. But I realized that my family will never stop loving me and stop providing for me if I started modeling a certain way. I just realized that as long as I didn't do anything traumatic like commit murder, which every time I get close to thinking about it, I'm just like, jail time is just not what's up. Me being in jail and being black, and I would not last. I would not last at all. Like, I think about the outcomes before I do anything. And then I also think about, like, is it really worth it? I think of, like, all the chains of events, like the butterfly effect. If I do this, what could possibly happen? If I do this, what will happen? If I do this, what will happen? And then I think of all the possible outcomes before I do something. And that's how I am. Even when it comes to picking people I'm dating, or even thinking about who I might possibly talk to and things of that nature and how it's going to make me feel. That's how I am. I've always been an overanalyzer. I try my best, and I feel like at the end of the day, for me to be a person who wants to heal the world, I feel like in order to figure out how to heal the world and how to make better judgment calls is by starting with self. And a lot of our generation is starting to do a lot of self-discovery. A lot of our generation is trying to mold the pathway to something better, and then trying to instill good morals into our children and down on and so forth. One thing I can honestly say, with stigmas, with differences, we have to learn and accept that everybody's going to be different. That every generation, every race, male, female, are going to be different. One thing that I honestly could tell you is this. The reason why I don't go into relationships and treat every guy with suspicion unless they give me, without unreasonable doubt, suspicion. I've had guys who've cheated on me. I've had guys who've abused me. I've had females who are super dominant with me. And honestly, I'm not the type to be dominated. I'm really not. I look at it as this. Why am I going to treat you or punish you for something somebody else did? One thing a lot of us as women do in our generation is that we hold on so much seated hatred. And I don't think it's just our generation. I think it's older generation as well. And hopefully we can stop this if we could see the patterns. Is we have a habit of treating every guy wrong after one guy messes up. Or every female. Well, whoever you're dating. Whatever sex you decide to date. And same with guys. We typically have so much distrust now that we typically hold on to that distrust. And when we finally meet a good person, we treat that person badly because we feel like they're too good to be true. But I've realized that the long run, hurt people hurt people. So when you're hurt and battered from a past relationship, and I feel like this is something relationship-wise and generational-wise and sex-wise as women we have to stop and guys, is this. When you go into a new relationship, don't automatically go into a new relationship and say all men or all women are, bitches, and all men are dogs and all men are cheaters. Just because you see some similarities, and yes, you may be pointing out a pattern, but just like that partner, you guys are in a whole new situation together. He's never dated you. You never dated her. this, that, and the other. Like, y'all have never dated each other. So you have to look at it in a standpoint of, I don't know what you're going to do and what your intentions are. I feel like with our generation, we're a lot more honest. And with the older generation, they usually they're straightforward too now. But a lot of them, in the same way, they will sit here and cover white lies. But our generation, we real quick to be, man, whatever you won't do, another person will do, this, that, and the other. And we straightforward about it. We ain't lying. We got pity people in the pocket. We handle things differently in our generation. We do a lot of the same stuff, but we do it more open compared to the older generation. And that's why the older generation looks at us so badly. We're so quick to, when a relationship ends or when marriage starts going bad, we divorce people. But at the end of the day, if you can't make it work, you can't make it work. That's the difference between our generation and the other generation. Other older generations, they believe if you get married, it's you and that person against the world. But some people just don't have that same values. As generational changes happen, a lot of the morale changes. We don't have the same morale like the generation that grew up in the 70s and the 80s. We have different morale, where we are constantly growing and evolving, and we know what works for us and doesn't work for us. And yet our patience is thinner. While a lot of the older generation, they'll sit here and work it out, separate for 3, 4, 5 years, come back and meet in the middle and stay together for children and this, that, and the other. But honestly, our generation don't do that. If it ain't working, it ain't working. We leave because we realize there's plenty of fish in the sea. But here's the deal, though. When you know you love somebody, you're going to do everything in your power to keep that person. That's not a generational thing. That's just a you thing. If you know for a fact you love this person and this person loves you, you guys are going to do whatever you can to make it work. One big thing that I noticed, though, that is different in our generation compared to other generations, our generation doesn't really court each other. We don't go out on dates no more. Guys don't show females how much they want to be with them no more. It's more of the female showering the guys with gifts now, and I've noticed that. But a lot of the guys now, they don't show girls that they feel appreciated. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some guys out there. I'm not saying all guys are like this. All relationships are like this. But most relationships now, in our generation, they're not old fashioned. They don't sit here and want to cater to you and buy you gifts and, randomly just show you how much they appreciate you. And like I said in a previous episode, there was a guy that worked with me, and every day he wrote his wife a letter. Every day. Didn't buy her nothing. Just every day wrote her a handwritten note. It didn't even have to be long. It would just be a handwritten note every single day of their marriage. And they've been married for over 10 years. It's small gestures that we don't have anymore. That generation was more generous, heartfelt, caring, and they showed their appreciation. Our generation, yes, we're generous, but we do it more for publicity in a way. I've realized most people, when they do generous things, they need to post it on social media. They need to have people shout them out. You should do something out of the kindness of your heart without expecting anything in return. In a way, our generation looks for that praise versus the older generation where they just did things just to do it without having to wait for praise or wanting to get recognition. We care in our generation so much about strangers' opinions and are we a good person, are we a bad person, while the older generation didn't care about that. They only cared about what their family thought or what their partner thought. They didn't care about other opinions outside of their household. Like, honestly, in my personal opinion, I tell people all the time, opinions are like assholes, everybody has them. And the only people's opinions that really digs deep in me is people that I care about. So anybody that I'm close to or I'm associate with, it's whatever. But people who are my true friends, like they know me, like know my name, my date of birth, what kind of tacos I like and what's my favorite drink and what kind of alcohol gets me to be like real, like twerking on top of a stage and stuff. Like they know the vulnerable me, the fun me, and the one who knows all the embarrassing stories. Those people, they call me something outside my name, they hurt. I could be called selfish all day, every day, no problem, from a total stranger. But somebody who's known me for years, if they call me selfish, knowing good and well I'm not a selfish person, that would hurt. Like, that's where it matters to me. I think that's where it differentiates for me, because I have a friend now, because I have a lot of different morals from every generation, and that's where I get, because I evolve as I get older. I take stuff from my brother's generation, my generation, and from my parents' generation, and I mix it and make me who I am today. Partially, I do care about the public eye because of my podcast and because of my modeling, but like people who really know me, if you came up to me off the street and said, "Oh, you're a bitch, this, that, and the third," I'm just like, ow. And I would really get in my mood about it. But if a stranger came up to me and called me all those things, I would be like, okay, cool. I mean, exit stage left. Whatever. Do you. And then I analyze. I pay attention. Very few of us, people who really want to evolve in our generation and to not fall to these stigmas, we watch, we note, we pay attention, we evolve. And I've realized a lot of our generation is changing. A lot of our generation is evolving. We're acknowledging our mental health issues. We're blatantly screaming from the mountains that we have depression. We're blatantly screaming from the mountains we have anxiety. While back in the day, my dad's generation wouldn't even dream about it. They used to drown themselves in alcohol and weed and drugs and partying and hanging with friends. And we admit that we have problems. So I'm not saying that our generational stigmas make it bad. We acknowledge that we are not perfect. We acknowledge that we're perfectly imperfect. And honestly, that's the first step of making it better. So we're already showing that as humans, we are evolving and we're getting better. So all we have to do in our generation to instill in our children for future generations, so their stigmas, when they have theirs, is that we can't judge them, because that's going to be a different time. That's going to be a different moment. Those are their moments. We have to accept that they're evolving and that we are playing a hand in their evolving, in their growth. One thing I honestly look at when it comes down to my stigmas, my dad told me the other day when I went down to Tampa, when he found out my hair was cut. He's like, all right, take care of it. Better grow it out. You look like a boy right now. It hurt me that he told me that. And he's been talking to me about, everything going on with the separation and moving on with my life. At first, he was just like, no, y'all need to work it out, this, that, and the other. And I'm just like, there's nothing to work out. It takes two to tango. I can do everything in my power. And that's the difference between their generation and mine. If one person is working at it and the other person isn't, there's nothing you can do. I've always been a firm believer of getting both sides of the story when it comes down to things. So when it comes down to gossip and all this other stuff, I always go back to the sources. I always go back to it. I always try to figure things out. I try to analyze and grow from it. So honestly, stigmas, especially for generations, come into different forms. What are your stigmas? How are you trying to evolve from those stigmas? How are you trying to change from those stigmas? How are you trying to better the next generation? Especially those who have kids. More or less, look at those, analyze it, And remember, stigmas just means any bad marks, any blemishes. And easy way to point out what a stigmas are is look at anything that you might consider or may look at that you do that might be embarrassing. That could be a stigma. Something that you know your parents will probably be ashamed of. Are you proud of them? Is it making your life better because you're speaking them out loud? How can you better for the next generation? Just remember, it is okay to not be okay. It's okay to be perfectly imperfect because perfect is boring. And what one person wouldn't love, the next person will. Believe me, I am emotionally needy. I have anxiety, depression, and PTSD. One man may not be able to handle it, or one female may not be able to handle it. But then another person will come here and look at it and said, you know what? Let me help carry this for you. Let me help unpack this. Let me help you put some of this in storage or put it away. Because what one person may not think you're perfect, the next person will think you're perfect. Just as long as you are your true, genuine self, unapologetically you. And then when you have your generation below you, your legacy, mold your legacy to be just as perfect. Imperfect in their own way, but perfect for them. Nobody should be able to tell you you're perfect but you. You gotta know it. And I'm gonna instill that when I have kids, that, you know what? So what? You know, you're not symmetrical. So what? You're not the skinniest person in the world. But there's only one you. Don't let the older generation make you feel bad, and do not let the younger generation. Opinions are like assholes and everybody got them and they all stink. Remember, guys, stay safe in this quarantine. Wash your hands. Stop touching shit. Practice good hygiene. Protect your energy. And from your neighborhood friendly witch, with love, care, and many blessings, I hope you guys stay safe. And I'll see you next week.